very good morning to you all. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. Today, I'm Chamberlain Uso.
Indeed, it's a new work week, and I don't recall that there are any public holidays this week. So get up and go to work. Welcome to the program. I'm Malkwe Yusuf.
Malkwe, let the people that enjoy public holidays breathe. But hey, we're up bright and early, right? Welcome to Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. I'm Ikechukwu.
Well, it's a new month, as you all know. It's the second half of the year 2023, and it's the first work day of the second half of the year. Welcome. I'm Ayo Makide.
Well, don't forget, guys, I think some states, I don't know if they've started implementing it, though, where they did tell those in the civil service to come to work like 3 times a week or something. So
is that the same thing as a public holiday? Work from home doesn't mean you should enjoy
which home? They carry the computer and the civil service, carry it to their home desktop, and then work from home. Yeah, right. Like, we don't know how these things work. Work from home, indeed. Then they take it back to work on the day after because they want. Nah, I'm not sure it works like that. When they were even resisting digitizing some offices and functions, and then work from home. And speaking about working from home, guys, I don't know if. I mean, people need to tell us what their scenario is in different parts of the country. Remember the timeline that was given for that electricity charge. So what's going on where you are, if you actually do pay attention? I mean, in some areas where they usually get premium service, it was 75 naira per kilowatt. And then some say they were planning to hike it up to, guess what, 300 naira per kilowatt. That would be killing.
There's no way you will not notice that, Chamberlain. There is absolutely no way. What we've just heard is that the NERC has said they haven't approved that, and there is no way that any disco can hike tariff without the approval of the NERC. But there is still a lack of trust. So you still find, because it's very rare for discos to actually send out these notices to say, look, we're about to hike these prices, and we would like you to, make sure that, buy before this day. Save as much as you can before the 1st of July. Otherwise, it's going to go up, and this is going to be the new price. I think I have to quickly get that message now, but for those within who are getting between, is it less than 18 hours a day, between 12 and 18 hours, you're going to be paying 100 naira per kilowatt hour. Those above who are getting maybe between 18 to 24 hours, and the people who will get that, you're going to be paying an unspecified amount. They haven't even specified it. So if it's as much as 300 naira, which you say, then there's no way you will not notice it when you buy. If you usually buy maybe like 50,000 naira worth of electricity, and it gives you a certain amount of units, and you see that the number has severely dropped, because that would be like a third of what you normally buy. There's no way you would not notice. So let us hope that the statement of the NERC has put on hold for now, effectively, whatever it is that the discos have planned with regards to a hike in electricity tariff. But if by any chance you happen to buy and you notice that it has gone up, today is just the 3rd, it has gone up since the 1st. If any way you notice that, do let us know. I mean, we're certainly happy to take on this particular
issue. We know what goes up in this country.
What goes up doesn't come down. But it should. I mean, if at the end of the day, all of this is about a float of the naira, etc., it should mean that when the naira eventually gains ground, we hope to see that it will also be reflective in price of petrol, in price of electricity tariff, and all the things that claim that they had gone up because of dollar. We are hoping that they will eventually see that drop in the prices. Maybe he's hoping for too much, but hey, I'll still hope anyway.
Well, it's really tough times, I must say. I mean, electricity is just a percentage of what you have to spend money on a monthly basis to survive, really. I was just, trying to get confirmation on that 3-day work week, Kwara, I think for Kwara and those states. And well, from the statements that were released, looked like It was meant to take immediate effect. So let us know if you're in those states, if you're really enjoying that. And I imagine that this will percolate across board. I don't know how it will work, though, for traders and people who have to earn a living on a daily basis. You know how it works. I mean, you need to make money on a daily basis. And for them, the subsidy removal, which some people say might even get worse, right, is eating really deep. So they have to think about electricity. What I really find perplexing or shocking is the fact that there's very little communication. NERC has a Twitter handle, and these days a good way to pass information is across social media. But when you go to NERC's Twitter handle, I mean, the statements you see, the last statement was on June the 30th, and he was saying something completely different. He was saying electricity is the most versatile and easily controlled form of energy. It's a quote.
Please confirm that that's 2023.
2023. Oh, well, kudos really that we have a statement in 2023.
Yeah.
But nothing related to this plan.
The fact that you don't have anything in 2023, we should give thumbs up.
No, I think a lot of government agencies have been doing well in terms of social media. Well, better than what we used to see. But the information needs to be passed across appropriately. Because what they say about trust. First, subsidy was meant to last up until July. Or at least first day,
end of June,
then
now.
Of course, starting in July. But it was removed a month early. So a lot of people still have trust issues saying, well, government might say one thing and do another, or the regulatory agencies might do one thing and say another. So I think it's important to have that information really put across.
Communication, not just information, Kayode, but communication. Yeah. Not just information, because shared understanding or shared meaning, mutual understanding. What you say is exactly what I understand. I think that's very, very crucial, and it's been lacking for a while. Well, guys, in all of this, while we're talking about, what the NERC is doing and all of that, one cheering thing is that the states now, by virtue of the Constitution Amendment, can now produce their own electricity. So what is going to happen? Is that going to be anything cheering? How will it even work? That, say Kebbi State has started producing its own electricity. Is it going to put it in the national grid, or are we going to have a state grid of electricity and all those things? So maybe that might be something to help with the pricing and all of that. I guess, time will tell, and we'll wait to see. Another angle in that conversation is ensuring that there is the rural electrification project of the federal government in the past administration. How is that also playing in all of these things? But, Kayode, you are the one that started it. Let electricity consumers breathe.
At some point, that statement will be used so much that we might even have to copyright it, because it just works for literally anything.
Because as you said, and as we all know, people are literally suffering, struggling by the day to survive. I don't know. This is the third term, right? September is just ahead. School fees are going to, I don't know whether there's going to be an upward or a downward review. Please allow me to think, to fantasize. Whether it's going to go up or go down.
Well, you have the summer, the holiday period at least to breathe.
Let that information not be unknown to the federal government. But most importantly, as Kayode said, communication with the people is extremely important so that the people can own the policies that government is dishing out. Otherwise, as far as they are concerned, is that you are clobbering us with a hammer and you're asking us to be silent. No, that cannot be the way to go. So NERC, all eyes on you. Are you monitoring? Chamberlain.
Oh, dear. Well, you say, allow me to breathe. You talk to the dollar exchange rates. They are the ones that may. But look, that notice is there. It just pops up again this morning, where for instance, in Abuja, it's AEDC. There are public service announcements about that increase is out there still, which they did remind us, effective 1st July 2023, that there will be an upward review to the electricity tariff influenced by the fluctuating exchange rate. Under MITO 2022 guidelines, the previously set exchange rate of 441 naira to the dollar may now be revised to approximately 750 naira to the dollar, which will have an impact on the tariffs associated with your electricity consumptions. Now, they did give a breakdown for those categories. They say,
and that was the frightening part, Chimbley.
Yeah, it says, for instance, within Band C, with supply hours ranging from 12 to 16 hours per day, the new base tariff is expected to be, look at that, 100 naira per kilowatt, while Bands A, with 20 hours and above, and B, 16 to 20 hours, will experience comparatively higher tariff. But how much higher tariff is this now?
It didn't say.
Oof. So you see where the challenge is now.
It didn't. I remember that part very
not specific
clearly
about some of these things. See, this gives window for possible corruption, manipulation,
rumors.
They'll take advantage of anything, because if it's not specified, this group of people can come today and tell you, you have to pay this. Another group tells you, no, this is what you pay. Well, if you want to pay, please do something, I'll help you go and get it quick. All sorts of things. If you specify the first band, why not the other? And besides, for this, since today, Monday, 3rd, is the first work day of this month for a lot of people. So you wonder, so what if people had bought this because they advise people to buy in bulk?
Yes.
So what if you bought in bulk and you have the token and you haven't loaded it in your meter?
No, you have your token is tied to the amount of units you have bought.
So not when you go...
No, it's not when you load it, no.
Because
it's not when you load it. It doesn't work with half. It's not like your meter starts to work faster. No, that's not how it works.
Well, what if you get it and you didn't load it up until the 2nd?
It doesn't matter.
And it's supposed to kickstart on the 1st, the tariff.
That's what I'm saying.
So unless you must have bought it before...
You must buy that. So it works. It's like saying, go and buy this iPad or this pen before the 1st. If you buy this pen before the 1st, it's 100 naira.
Yeah.
After the 1st, it goes to 300 naira. For instance, it's still going to be the same pen you buy. You're just going to buy it for more. So whatever units you're buying after now, if you have a specific number of units you buy, maybe like 100 units, for instance, it would just cost you more. But it will still be the number of units that you're buying. Do you understand my point?
Yeah, but well, if you need further assistance, they put the numbers there. Just call them.
Exactly, call them. I'm not their spokesperson.
Several people have prepaid estimated billing to keep asking, look, they're going to kill us with all of this because we don't know what to expect. So if people don't know what to expect, if they can't plan, how do they trudge on?
Let me tell you what will kill people more. What will kill people more is when they go and buy this electricity, assuming they bought it. I do not know. I mean, as we said, there's one thing for NERC to say something, another thing for the discos to actually follow what the NERC has said. So we really do not know if the discos are really obeying right now. And that's what we're saying. If you notice any difference, please do let us know. However, if people buy this electricity in bulk, it doesn't mean that they've tied down their money. It means that money that they would have used to do other things, they've now tied it down with electricity. Now imagine that there is no electricity and they now still have to use their generators. What will you call that? That's double jeopardy. That's what will kill the people. Throughout this weekend, we had no electricity, well, for a number of reasons. But, well, eventually, they brought it back. I mean, after like 48 hours. Well, imagine in the 48 hours having to run a generator.
That's a lot.
A petrol generator.
At 537 or 540 naira per litre.
And it's about to go up. So, anyways, this is where we are.
Well, I hope that, look, the governments, because we don't have, I'm not sure if people, I stand corrected, do we actually have that credit system in the country wherein you get some facilities and then you provide those amenities, you spread your payment over time? Because many places here, they tell you must pay today, now. No PSS, pay small. So if we can have that kind of system, I think it will take a lot of load off people. Well, those are very important matters. We needed to highlight some of them this morning. Yeah, well, let's go to the dailies and take you through what they are equally reflecting this morning and see how that concerns you. The Guardian is the very first one here. Pump price hike. Well, yeah, there you go. Households consider solar alternatives amid high onboarding cost. Period. So there you go. People have to think now.
Out of the box.
How do I make things better? That is what is going on now. So We hope to talk about some of these things as we progress on the program this morning, but we're going to leave it at that with the Guardian here today. Indeed, and that's, can't blame people. People don't want to be subject to the vagaries of the AEDC and of the EKEDC and all of besides, in this country, people provide their own water, their own electricity, their own security. Some tar their own roads. They are practically their own local governments.
Well, this is New Telegraph is looking at something different, and they have this. Federal government rejects EU missions report on 2023 polls. That's what New Telegraph has on its front page. Says findings, poorly done desk job. Insists election most transparent since 1999. Alleges EU on assault mission on nation sovereignty, stability. Very heavy words there. Rejection, face saving, LP tells federal government. The details are on pages 2 and 6 for you. You also have this. CBN banks assets rise by 25.88% to 80.97 trillion naira. Were they revalued as a result of the dollar? Je ne sais pas. I don't know. I might want to flip to page 3 to see how bank assets rose. But let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
Well, the Nigerian Tribune has this one as its lead. Yes, you may have seen that already. Presidency rejects EU report on 2023 polls. EU report accurate, Labour Party counters. And you see, report shows election lacked credibility. Atiku, this is a big conversation. We'll be breaking it down for you, breaking down the report, some of the major components and the reaction. So stay with us on the show. It's going to be a big one. Page 22 for more details of that one. And there's another story right below the big picture that says 23 ex-VCs in trouble. 10 may face prosecution over fraud allegations. 13 to refund billions of naira. VCs, vice chancellors. So that's a major one for our education system, particularly the tertiary education system.
Which is crucial. I think people underestimate the importance of university education. They call it the policy level, education in the country. That is why previously, previous years of our nationhood, a good number of ministers came from the academia. And because they knew the policies, okay, so come and execute the policies,
Absolutely, and I think a lot of people underestimate that. Even if I take it to the present time, INEC had to draw its workforce from the academia, the tertiary institutions, and I'm talking about at the very top level, literally,
professors, doctors,
VCs, and all, just to ensure election management. So imagine all of the things going on, how it affects other parts of our national life. So more details on page 3, in case you're wondering what is this about. 23 ex-VCs in trouble. I don't know if some names were mentioned, but hey, it's worth a look. And still on the education sector, one more. UTME candidate celebrated for emerging top scorer has fake result. That's coming from JAMB. Withdraws result set for prosecution. And you wonder what exactly is happening, because the image is circulating saying, that was the SMS the candidate got, showing the score the candidate had. This is back and forth about whether or not indeed, but we would like to get to the root of this. Was it really manipulated? Was it an error from JAMB, or was it a manipulation from the student? We need to get to the root of this, because again, this is at the heart of our
absolutely. And trust and the rest of it. Yeah. Leadership newspaper has this on its front page, still also talking about that main issue of the 2023 elections. Presidency, Labour Party, CSOs differ on EU report. Stories on page 4. Here are the riders. Let us breathe. Presidency tells EU observers, you're just saving your face. LP fires back. Over 1,000 petitions suggest poor conduct, according to CSOs. The courts will decide, says IPAC. Find the details of that on page 4. That picture on the front page you're seeing is that of the governor of Osun State and former governor of Osun State, Governor Adeleke, as well as a former governor of old Oyo State, which comprised the now Osun and Oyo State at the time, Dr. Omololu Olunloyo, when the governor visited him, the current governor of Osun State visited him. That's the leadership newspaper this morning.
Yeah, let's look at Vanguard newspaper. March to Nigeria's economic recovery revealed. Tinubu's move against terrorism. So that's their lead story on the front page of Vanguard newspaper here today. And then they've got quite a host of writers here. Comprehensive onslaught against terrorists and bandits begin. Security architecture set for review. Rules of engagement to be determined by the nature of the security threat. More shake-up imminent in the security services. President vows to stop crude oil theft. Well, that will be an interesting one. Economic policies to reflect contemporary realities. Scores of captives released as farmers return to their farms in Northwest. Consultations in the political, economic, and security spheres continue. So you have a lot just factored in here. So you should probably go ahead and take a look at that. And then, guys, anxiety as FG resumes work on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway today. Well, you guys just don't be anxious for nothing, actually. So just be calm as much as you can.
Yeah, indeed. They stopped work for the holidays to allow ease of passage, and it does appear that that worked. So let us hope that there will be, an increased pace of work so that this can quickly be over and done with, and people can go back to using the roads in the manner that they used to use it before the construction started. Yeah. Or even better. That's the prayer. It should be a better experience. Look at what the Abuja Inquirer has on the front page. Yes, indeed, we have our own issues right here in the Federal Capital Territory. Abuja agency exposes FCT residents to sewage toxins. That's a very messy one, yeah. Shut down sewage plant over indebtedness to diesel supplier. Dumps fecal matter in river. Workers owed for several months. Oh, yeah, very unpretty situation, if you like. It's page 3, read for you, right there on the front page. A lot to think about in the rains. I mean, when you're talking about sewage, fecal matter, things are being dumped in the river. Looks like cholera is something that, it could be invited. I sincerely hope not. I hope people understand the consequences of their own actions. And of course, speaking about, rivers, the FCT has been experiencing some flooding in recent times in some areas. So hopefully we hope to keep tabs on that, because it does appear that there will be some action around Trademore Estate area today and tomorrow. But look at this. Police station estate on floodplains to be demolished. That's according to the FCDA. And just talking about Trademore, Trademore Estate has no approved building plan. Yes, you just heard that. A whole estate. How did that happen?
Yeah, how's that possible?
How is that possible? So you find details on page 3 of the paper. Chamberlain, corruption and its effect is something else. You have to be sure when you get your papers, because you might be getting it from government quarters. You might get your paper from one but if it's not the right government quarters, and the people who are rightfully empowered say no, you do not have the right, to do that, or
but they saw the building go up. It's been there for years.
They will be looking at you. They'll be until one day government will wake up and then decide that you don't have a plan. You actually don't have the correct. You don't have. These are the kind of things you hear. Really, and this will be after people would have paid billions almost, to certain people in government, and this is what you tell them at the end of the day.
This is why we always say, look, whether it's customs, whether it's immigration, FCTA, can't they just publish the requirements that is needed to get anything done?
And publish approved plans. And people should be able to get it with the click of a button.
So if they can't see it, how do people know which is which if it's not there for people to see?
But how will people profit if there's no secrecy? Well, let's leave it there for the Abuja inquiry. Let's not try and... well, no, we're not trying to nationalize our Abuja issues, gentlemen. We leave it there for the Abuja Inquirer.
It's okay. Abuja is at the heart of the nation.
Besides,
so
you make it sound like
to the heart.
Yeah, you make it sound like it's limited to only Abuja.
Let's stay with Abuja for now. Let's open the can of worms. But it's quite interesting. If he has no building plan, I mean, I think that's different from having no approval to build, or at least having a proper document. So we need to really understand building plan, then the right document. So I think it's important to clarify that from the authorities. Really,
communication.
Yeah, because building plan might actually be the fault of the government anyway. But take a look at this. Nigeria leads with this one: anxiety over Tinubu's ministerial nominees. The question then is, who's anxious? As Senate likely to commence screening this week, President will not abandon opposition leaders who supported him, so we'd like to see how that plays out. So we'll have members of the Labour Party, PDP, NNPP in that cabinet. That'll be quite interesting. And just one more for you. Outrage over bumper take-home packages for ex-service chiefs. That's gotten a lot of people talking, the vehicles and all of that. Proposal illegal, morally wrong, under current harsh economic realities, page 4. So it's, again, important to have government speak on this. And let's know, is that the case? And how did you come about all of this? Because, hey, it's taxpayers' money at the end of the day.
Does it look like, is that another Ramfak issue?
I was going to say Ramfak, really, but, everybody involved. That's this Nigeria.
The Nigerian News Direct is also interested in the reports of the EU 2023 election presidency falls EU final report. Stories on page 21. A lot has been said about that already. But look at the bottom of the page. Flooding, FCDA set to demolish police station, others. So it's not just Strathmore here now. Even the police station and a number of others will have to still go.
So law enforcers may have been breaking the law. Is that what they're saying?
No, maybe because the building is compromised. But we chatted. We talked about it a little earlier. What happened to the houses that were flooded in Bayelsa and in Kogi? Was it Kogi last year?
Yeah.
What happened to them? How many of them have been demolished? What's the compensation plan for those ones? It's important that these things be brought to bear. Otherwise, hey, where exactly are we? And of course, that story about the JAMB withdrawing the result of the candidate who secured 3 million naira scholarship, by the way. I'm from quite a prominent, institution, organization. Don't worry, you'll find the details of that story on page 2 of the Nigerian News Direct this morning. And the Nigerian News Direct helps us draw a curtain on the look at the papers today. We're back right after now to take the issues one after the other. Do stay with us.
Effort on the part of the central bank.
It's that time again when representatives of development finance institutions, government officials, and economists converge to assess the nation's economy. Yes. The event, tagged the Nigeria's Development Update, throws a searchlight on the economy and policy recommendations for job creation, poverty reduction, and economic growth over a 6-month period. This time, the World Bank's attention is specifically on the petroleum subsidy removal and the exchange rate unification.
In the last month, what we've seen are really, from our perspective, the beginnings of that move through these bold decisions that have been taken. I know they've been controversial, but the way I would put it, I like to use metaphors. It's a bit like when you have, internal hemorrhaging. And it's getting to the point where the patient is in critical condition, you have to do emergency surgery. It may be painful, it will come as a shock, But that emergency surgery is needed, and it takes courage.
This is then followed by an analysis of how the recent policies of the government will impact Nigerians.
Inflation will increase this year, but then as of next year, we'll see inflation beginning to decrease as a result of the impact of this, meaning less recourse to central bank finance, slower growth of the money supply, better growth dynamics.
Done with the speeches, the conversations continue in a plenary discussion. While members of the private sector seek a well-regulated exchange rates regime that will favor investors, government officials speak on plans to ameliorate the sufferings experienced by Nigerians as a result of the removal of fuel subsidy.
What we're looking for is price stability. What we're looking for is an ability for investors to bring in their money and have a fair view as to what it's going to take for them to make a return in dollar terms, okay, and remit their money.
We are all sure that with the right measures will be a temporary spike in inflation, and that involves using the World Bank's financial muscle to have a loan from the World Bank, which will be used as direct cash transfers for the poorest. That has long been mooted, and it's a policy decision or a policy recommendation that has pretty much been accepted.
These are definitely interesting times in the nation's economy, and the consensus here is that buffers be created to cushion the impact of the recent policies on Nigerians.
Welcome back. Professor Ikechukwu joins us now. He is the Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. Good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. My pleasure.
Well, the thing about all of this is no matter how lofty the plans are from government, at the end of the day, it is the results and how people, the impact is what will be paramount. And if you could just backtrack for a bit, I know that, yes, this government is going ahead and addressed taking subsidy off headlong, but the statements came through from Govt, spokesperson of the former president, Buhari, about why they left that petrol subsidy. And it raised questions concerning probably some of the intention behind their policy. So perhaps you could just give us some sort of background, if you will, on what you make of that statement as it concerns perhaps then delving into some of the policies that this government has taken so far.
Well, for me, at least at the level of professional public communication, I would have been reluctant to make that kind of statement as immediate aide of a former president, because it brings up issues. It will suggest, and it does suggest, that my boss was more interested in if you like, electoral victory. In other words, that he's the kind of person who will see a necessary policy decision and hold it back in order to gain something. And I also doubt that it was a conscious decision because of the current president. Because let's look at the variables. While the elections were on, President Tinubu lamented, at least we had it on TV, about those in Aso Rock working against him. We also heard that the Naira redesign was targeted against his candidacy. And a lot of people from within the party who were his boys, quote and unquote, came out to contest against him. And yet, at some point, the view was very strong that the president himself didn't give it endorsement, particularly with his reaction to the Naira redesign. So that Tinubu is, in my view, somebody who emerged in spite of the forces within the APC and outside the APC. So now suddenly turn around and say that the single factor of not reducing fuel subsidies was done deliberately to ensure that he won. If any one of the other measures, sabotage measures put in place had worked, he wouldn't have been president. So I don't know the value of that. And let's also backtrack further and even ask the question, was the trajectory of the Buhari government entirely surprising? Not for me. If you go back to, he contested several times, but by 2014, There was this interview about what he will do about security. And he said once he won, he will meet with former service chiefs, retired and highly rated generals to, determine the problem and find a solution. I remember I wrote about it in the paper because that's an indication that there's no template. That's number one. Number two, you must understand his reflexes as a leader. As military president, remember essential commodities? Now, this is a man who can play a flawless custodian role if you give him something to do. But development economics is not about ration giving. So essential commodities, who did you consult to confirm that what Nigerians need is milk? What was your 3 items? And it was being distributed. That's the business of the federal government in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Production was not on the line. It's not that you're even saying, okay, let's now get milk factories. That wasn't happening. So that ration sharing thing, you see replicated in the 8 years, culminating in the Ministry for Humanitarian Affairs. So production, creating wealth, no, borrow and give, just feeding. Now, at the level of political decision-making and frontal leadership, that's the only regime you can substantively say that is described in dual terms, Buhari Diabo regime. You can say Murtala Obasanjo because Murtala was killed. So the tendency to also, if you like, outsource leadership, to have greater visibility out of himself. Look at, if you really want to describe his term, before the demise of Kyari, it was a Buhari-Kyari presidency. So you see that but we are seeing a difference. Today, you know that there's a president who is the one taking decisions, and they're coming in quick succession. Of course, the concern is the impact, but I thought we should look at that. So anybody who understood his trajectory and orientation as a leader will have known that we are likely to end up with much of what we saw in the last 8 years in appointments. Also, as head of PTF, the same thing, the tendency to outsource authority. So I'm not sure this statement by my good friend Garba is very helpful. To begin with, I didn't think it was necessary.
Well, I'm looking at the policies now and whether we're back to, discussing what model Nigeria wants to go with. What economic model we really want to follow, whether we're with the neoliberalist, whether we're going to be a socialist, whether we're a mix of both. It's very uncertain because it does look like we want to go with the markets, but it does also appear that the consequences of that on our people, is grave. The consequences or it's not going to be without consequences, let me put it that way. In your own opinion, do you think that we've had a sufficient conversation on what economic model Nigeria truly wants to adopt?
I think we've had too much conversation on the model, and it's usually at the academic level. Among people who debate, who formulate policies, who will come on TV and tell you, okay, the medium-term economic framework, all of this, the exchange rate, the inflation is double-digit. We're talking to ourselves as members of the elite because all this grammar in Abuja and state capitals doesn't affect anything. You're talking about whether we go with the market. Do you go with the market when you have nothing to put in the market? That's part of the question to worry about. So in substantive terms, you have political models, you have economic models. It's impossible, for instance, to say we go socialist unless somebody carries out a coup and then begins to turn things around. The major issue on the table is that we have a consumption-driven elite that mistakes expenditure for investment in either human capital development or national development or economic development. To that extent, and let's be realistic about it, and let's look at, Now, UMPADEC was set up, how many? Probably over 30 years ago, oil mineral producing to develop the Niger Delta area.
It since evolved to the
NDDC. That's what I'm moving up to. Now, there's NDDC. Now, the effort to develop the Niger Delta is probably 40 years on, right? There's no development. It has the highest volume of unexecuted contracts in trillions. What does it exist to do? So that is one.
So why do you think that's the case, though?
Sorry?
Why do you think that is the case?
Why the problem is there? To begin with, the concept of development is totally misunderstood and distorted. If I live in a riverine area and you come there, you carry out a project, give us a town hall, build a road. How many people have cars there? You want to give us electricity. You didn't know you should use underwater cable. You're looking for poles and then to erect concrete on it. And with all that expenditure, development, if you say my orange has developed, what it means is that it doesn't mean it has become mango. The leaves have grown, it's developed flowers and produce oranges. Now you come to a riverine community where I can no longer fish because of pollution. Instead of you thinking of water reticulation and creating pond, which is very possible, if you like 1 mile big, you're giving me things that cannot work in that place. And the people are also misled into accepting it. So the point I'm making in this connection being that we are talking about models and debating models, whereas the question to ask is, what can we do about environment A? The man in the Northeast, there's a lot of expenditure now, Northeast Development Commission. Check the figure. Is the Northeast being developed? Procurement and distribution of mosquito net, food and all of that, is that development? Development is at the Northeast from where we get a lot of wheat, sugar cane, many things. We'll return to that. But because people have moved and they're in refugee camps and all kinds of places, re-desertification has taken over the place. So if those people are going to resettle, there has to be some new effort to rescue the soil and regain it. Then you look at agriculture, and this is a point I've made repeatedly. We want more food, but you need water to get food. Now, Ministry of Agriculture, or those who are doing farming at whatever level, you build dam to get more water. As you build dam, the water going downstream reduces, the economy is there die out, the young men begin to steal. So you find that Ministry of Environment, Water Resources and Agriculture, the synergy that should be guided by an overall perception of the ecology of the nation across board is not in place. So we can debate economic models. How much have we spent, for instance, in the last 20 years of democracy? And after that expenditure, the road between Abuja and Kaduna is still bad. Less than 2 hours drive. Between Abuja and Lokoja, Okene, Makodi. So national development cannot occur where the physical infrastructure for national cohesion doesn't exist, when the economic policies is elite-driven, when the leaders travel mostly by private jet and mistake expenditure for investment, when education, which is the factory for producing human capital, a governor goes, builds new schools, launches them, he hasn't employed a new teacher, is a procurement contract for colleagues. And I have examples I can give on the matter.
So about this fuel subsidy removal, would you say that policy is also elite-driven?
It is long overdue. It's one of the most fantastic decisions any government should make. It should have been made more than 10 years ago. So
what about the current impact right now?
There will always be an impact. Look, and let's break it down again. Here in Abuja, we buy fuel at the official price. You leave Abuja to Suleja, that's about 1 hour drive. You get it to some areas, but as you move further into Suleja, it's no longer the official price. You're driving from here to Katsina. In which place, except you get to state capitals, and only parts of state capitals, that's where you get at official price. This is the federal capital. You leave Lagos, official price in Lagos, you get to Ibadan. Very busy metropolitan city, you also get, but as you go further, Oyo and absent, the southeast, there's never been official price, and there's not been for about 15 years. So what point am I making? You're spending billions every week to make sure the man out there gets fuel at a subsidized rate. I pocket that subsidy, and the man is not getting the fuel.
So, concerning pocketing that subsidy, and part of the reasons why they've given that this is no longer sustainable is certain people pocketing it, they're smuggling it to neighboring countries.
And exaggerations about the quantity.
So the question then is, isn't that an inefficiency or corruption problem as opposed to the subsidy not achieving the aim that it was set out for? Because are they telling us that they can't, because right now we don't have information, we haven't even heard if they've arrested any such person, who are these people who are guilty of this? So what about those who are doing the smuggling themselves? Are they also invisible? Are they spirits? No. So if they took away the subsidy because of those reasons, what's the assurance that, look, these persons won't just move to another sector and continue, since you don't have that structure to deal with corruption?
No, you see, a thief is not trying to, he's not putting his energies into what to do in order to go to heaven. He's planning to steal. So now they are the people moving the fuel. We are subsidizing Cameroon, Benin Republic, nearly the whole of West Africa because they move it there. The moment this thing was removed, the price of fuel went up in Cameroon. So now, you are not talking about them stopping it. If it's at a regular market price that applies everywhere, there's nowhere to smuggle it to. That's number one. Number two, the quantities are not correct because what is subsidized is far beyond what we, Nigerians, were consuming. Thirdly, and I'll come to the question of impact, thirdly, you find that, like, your worry is, look, why can't it be stopped? Now, when the security man at your gate is the one letting in thieves, you're in trouble. The institutions of state that are supposed to prevent smuggling, from what we hear, and in some confirmed cases, all those who are managing those places have their own tankers also on the smuggling route. And that's a fact. It's something all the big boys are doing. That's why there are no arrests. Now, withdrawing it, the question then is, what do you do about the people? My salary hasn't changed. Now, transport has doubled. Not only has transport doubled, food prices, everything I need to do to be alive, price has increased. And my salary hasn't. What do I do? And government is talking about palliatives. And you remember there's the $88 million the Buhari regime secured for... $800 million. $800 million, yes, for the distant palliatives. And the government has already told us that in just 1 week, 1 month of withdrawal of subsidy, it has saved $400 billion. And so they need to publish what they've done with that. Who told them to do? They should first of all tell us where the money is. And why exercise discretion? Look, now, I pay school fees as a father living in Oshobo. I pay tax as an owner of SME. And you say, okay, no school fees for this year because the money recovered from the subsidy withdrawal will now be deployed to set off the cost or whatever is the same, and the figures can be made. How many students? If school fees are withdrawn for 1 year, right? What the expendable income of a father in Oshobo like me will increase. If you tweak taxes, the SMEs, the manufacturing sector will survive, etc. Because the real offensive thing about palliatives and financial backup is that the infrastructure for administering it is frightfully outrageous. You set up a fantastic office. We all have our SUVs. We are driving around, alleviating poverty in order to go and give people 200 naira, 20,000 naira. And we remember that during the COVID, we performed the miracle of feeding Nigerian children with 254 billion while they were in their parents' houses. Yeah. So who says witchcraft doesn't work in government? So those are some of the... let's go to our colleagues in Lagos. Go ahead, guys. Well, thank you, Chamberlain. Well, Prof, still staying on that topic of, the issues you've raised in the energy sector, there are a number of people who have not forgotten the issues around oil theft. It is still quite a prominent one as far as they are concerned. But going by, some of the things that you've said and the need to take proactive action, the Bank of America recently put out some kind of statements to corroborate a thing or two about that. They said that with the current momentum, the Tinubu administration, with the current momentum, Tinubu's next big move should be to reduce oil theft by reforming the security sector and involving host communities near the pipelines. You're not unaware of the brickbats about, who is stealing what as far as oil is concerned in this country. Do you agree with the Bank of America in this regard that the next big move for the president would be to work assiduously at reducing oil theft to the barest minimum? And then how do you factor in that brickbats between some interested parties in the oil theft saga? Well, first of all, I'll start from yes, it's a good idea. That's one thing, because if you're farming and your farm products are being taken by others and they're being sold in the market, you're getting poorer. So you just have a farm but no income. It's a good suggestion. It doesn't even have to be a suggestion. And it's something I believe the government itself is aware and thinking of what to do. there are crises at two distinct levels and probably a third. Now, at the level of involving the host communities, my question is, have the host communities been on the moon all this while? Have they not been there and this is going on? Are they not participants and beneficiaries? Do they not have reason even to be participants and beneficiaries, given that it's the bunkerers or oil thieves that are those through whom they make any money at all? If you're living in a place where you hear nothing about the state government except occasionally when big men drive around, your representative has no constituency office, you have no electricity. When you catch your fish, if you don't go quickly to the town to sell it off, in more urban areas, it will decay, so you don't have power to service it. And then there are people who come around the community and who give you money that you wouldn't make in 2 weeks. You work with them because the state has retreated from you. So the business of reintegrating the Nigerians in that part into a sense of citizenship, into a sense of part ownership of the Nigerian state, is something that is a task on its own. Beyond that, in some of those communities also, there's the perception among the less visible and less prominent people that their big men are sorted out by government, and there appears to be some indication confirming that. So there's also a disconnect between the elite at that level and the masses at that level. And so even when you've spoken to the elite, oh, keep these boys down, because the thing appears not to be trickling down to them, the boys themselves acquire a life of their own. If, for instance, you think of the restlessness we've had in that place that threw up people like Dokubo and the rest of it, if the elite were able to control the youth, those things wouldn't have come about. So that's at that level of local community. So his preachment will not do anything.
Well, so
yes,
then,
we are
Prof,
told man shall not live by bread alone.
My apologies. Do you have any confidence at all, any hope in whatever way, manner, shape, or form, that anything will come out of a probe of the oil theft regime, if we can say it that way, that some people have been advocating over time, that government should probe oil theft and the people involved? Do you see anything coming out of whatever kind of probe of that kind of thing?
Carried out. Yeah, it's possible. It depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. To begin with, don't forget that many of those you would want to use for the probe themselves need to be probed. Number two, it depends on how the leader, how far he's prepared to travel on the road he has chosen. Number three, making this happen then means you're going to have at least 3 decades of material to deal with, and in the process of that, you're going to find that some of the human pillars holding many aspects of our national life will need to be shaken. So the question is, are you ready to shake it? If your answer is yes, I'm ready to shake it, are you ready for the fallout? If you say yes, you're ready for the fallout, then open fire. So it is possible to achieve results, and this is not something that is without precedent. If you look at when first Buhari came as military head of state, you must give to him an idea bon. They said, no, this our country can't go on like this. People, at the point they took over, people we thought were untouchable, were arrested, all kinds of things were going on. Yes, issues later arose about 53 suitcases, but there was a perception of a resolve not to care about who you are, provided dealing with you will give us a better nation. The question at the moment is whether that can happen. There are concerns that some of the actors, both in the ruling party and in the wider elite network, traditional rulers, heads of corporate Nigeria, are likely to be in the line of fire. And there are also the concern that, okay, the current president is also their friend. But you see, you have what you call radical self-redefinition. That can happen. So to the extent that that can happen at all, I'm confident that if there's a decision to go all the way, taking out whatever needs to be taken out, it is feasible, but that's in principle. In practice, if you're ready for the power politics of it, that means a renegotiation of interests. I know that A, B, C, and D are going to be affected. I call them and say, listen, this needs to happen. You're going to take some beating in your level of... it's leadership and power politics can always get negotiated. But anybody who wants to leave a legacy of a new Nigeria really has a duty not to probe as a gesture. Oh, he's probing it. so that we'll keep the record. No, no, no. He should transform the sector. So we want to see immediate term results even while the probe is going on.
Let me just comment. It's very interesting what you're painting, and it looks like from what we have seen that might be an option for this government. But a lot of Nigerians will still want to see people hung in that sense. They want to see names. They want to identify these people as the ones who are responsible for pilfering the commonwealth of the nation. But you talked about the consequence of the policies that have been made. And I'd like you to just speak to that as we wind down. A lot of people, I don't know if you've seen that term, renewed shege. That's how a lot of people are, terming what they're going through right now. But it's quite ironic because it would seem that a lot of people agree that one subsidy should be removed, something should be done about the foreign exchange. But the reality is quite different. So for a lot of people, in fact, opposition has also taken that up, to reiterate that term. The Nigerians have seen 30 days of shege. How then should Nigerians interpret what is going on? Because they look at their disposable income, and indeed, it might be shege to them.
Well, the first thing to note is that we must make a distinction between opinion and knowledge. If you have malaria and you're familiar with chloroquine, nobody will tell you it's not something you will allow near your mouth under any circumstance. But because you have malaria, you swallow it. You even thank the person who gave it to you. If somebody asks your opinion, how do you feel about this thing? It's terrible. But your knowledge that is good for you makes you to keep quiet while swallowing it and saying waka to the doctor behind his back. But the point is this. Are many of the decisions he has taken now correct? My view, as economic decisions, my answer is yes. Are some of them likely to lead to positive transformation? My answer is yes. Do they have consequences? My answer is yes. Positive, yes. Are there some of them that may be questionable, in which the opposition is justified in saying we don't like this? The answer is yes. This is leadership, this is power politics, this is national development, this is citizenship survival. If Tinubu's decisions in the last 4 weeks are perfect, then he should be removed as president. That means he's not human. It is only in the process of play that you can fall down and get the ball again. So, yes, renewed shege because there's inconvenience, but the truth of the matter is that, quite frankly, what did we expect? That you swear him in, and first thing the next day, you have heaven in your hands? In a country like this, where a lot of things are wrong, where practically nothing is working, so let's make a distinction in this matter. Saying that some of the decisions are correct is not the same thing as saying, oh, I agree with him, I support him, I am a Tinubu person. On the contrary, it's about the nation. So the decisions, some of them will take time to mature into positives. Now, the opposition has a duty to continue to pick on the government because it is by knocking it on all sides that it will remain on the straight track. So jobs are defined in these matters. Opposition is not the same thing as hatred or attack or wickedness or whatever. All of them are concerned, like all of us, about the nation. So concerning decisions taken so far, people should do more of deep reflection. Do you expect, for instance, that immediately unify the exchange rate? Those who have been benefiting from it will go to sleep. They will think of other ways to subvert it and so create confusion. So it will take some weeks or probably months before the balance of forces, or if you like, the balance of strategic terrors neutralize each other. Then in the case of fuel subsidy, yes, the thing is, which was, I think Edo State moved to 3 days a week. All of it. Supposing, for instance, Edo State now says, okay, move it to 3 days a week, and then discover that in 3 days we are doing actually everything we need to do in government. And then, and go further to a policy of 3 working days, the other 2 days go to your farm, etc. It will happen. Things happen.
Well, that will be the day, but that's not happened yet.
No, of course. We expect it to happen immediately.
We know 2 states that tried that. Imo State did so under the government of Governor Okorocha.
Yes.
And Kaduna State also had that. They had, I think, Fridays. They were supposed to go to their farms. It would be interesting if there was any impact as a result of that.
They were not going to any farm. Exactly. In the case of Kaduna, if you go there, they kill you. In the case of Okorocha, it was more of a joke than a serious project. So those that... No, I'm not making a recommendation. I'm pointing out the sort of things that could lead to new thinking in how to manage the environment.
But the challenge about this is it appeared it was knee-jerk. Those plans were not in place to ensure that. How many of them even have those farms in the first place?
Which farm do you have in Benin? So, no. See, for me, see the exciting thing about this. If I step out of here and it's raining, I don't have an umbrella. That's how the real world is. Everyday life is full of ambush. So you must also know that that is the substance of life. And then as leader, even as you're ambushing, you're thinking of buffers.
Yeah, but in this case, people were thought, as we wind down on this, that this plan should have been in place way before now.
I agree.
And contrary to what they said, that it was an elitist, they were the ones benefiting, the poor people can't buy the petrol now.
See, I agree with you, but see where I disagree. If the bulk of the fuel the poor man buys is not at official rate, and we're not talking about those of us living in state capitals, they are not benefiting. What is the concern now is that the consequences is hitting across board, and still not hitting the big man because I can still afford it at the big price, at that price. Now, the concern about what should have been done before the announcement, assuming, for instance, cushions were in place before this, then that would be it. I agree with all of that, but it's a decision that's already been taken. And what one would know, you will now see they say they will want to go and buy mass transit buses. Again, is a procurement contract. Interventions must target what will increase the expendable income of the common man.
It will be good to see what template.
Tariff shouldn't go up. If you say tariff go and give the electricity companies the money. Keep it where it is because you're forcing me to pay more. Certain things under control of government shouldn't go up. Then you're talking serious engagement.
So perhaps another day to engage that principle of subsidy. Should we talk about removing subsidy across board? Because in some other claims, of course, you have to subsidize because if you don't, you just might be ready for some challenge to handle. And then food availability, transports, key things in sectors of economies or countries that they cannot afford to play with. How are we approaching all of those? Well, those are matters that we will be talking a lot more as we progress. And not forgetting, all right, look, we'll just anchor at this point. But Prof, just about when the engine is just cranking to get started, I know that feeling, but of course, we'll find a way to ensure that we keep these conversations on the burner. Professor Ikechukwu is Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Aye, as always.
All right, we will be back in a moment. Stay with us. Talking about policies coming through, well, we'll see about that one. But remember the European Union, well, they did put up a report about elections. But yes, we've got two gentlemen who will be joining us this morning to shed some light and probably don't heat on this matter. Jacob Pella is the founder and CEO of TAF Africa. TAF Africa is a critical partner of European Union's Partners for Governance project. He'll talk more and explain to us that context. But in Kano, we also have Ali Mohammed Ali, who is a former Deputy Director of Media and Publicity for APC's Presidential Campaign Council. Gentlemen, good morning, and thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, Chamberlain. Good morning, Mark.
All right. So I'm just going to read...
Good morning, Chamberlain Lamakwe.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to go through parts of Mr. Alake's statement. Then we'll also look at parts of the EU statement so that both of you can just jump right in, because that's first, the EU put up a report about the elections, and then the special advisor to the president on special duties and communications and strategy, Mr. Dele Alake, did put up a response to that. So he says, part of that statement read, sometime in May, we alerted the nation through a press statement to the plan by a continental multilateral institution to discredit the 2023 general elections conducted by INEC. The main target was presidential election, clearly and fairly won by the then candidate of the APC, President Bola Tinubu. Well, part of it also says there is no substantial evidence provided by the EU or any foreign and local organization that is viable enough to impeach the integrity of the election. And then it says, we would like to know, and even asked EU, how it reached the conclusions in the submitted final report with the very limited coverage of elections by the observers, who without doubt relied more on rumors, hearsay cocktails of prejudiced and uninformed social media commentaries and opposition talking heads. And then let me jump to this part where he says, we have many reasons to believe the jaundice report, based on the views of fewer than 50 observers, was merely to sustain the same premature denunciatory stance contained in EU's preliminary report. And then the key part where he says, we strongly reject in its entirety any notion and idea from any organization, group, and individual remotely suggesting that the election was fraudulent. And then if you look at part of the EU report, from which this comment is directed, part of that report, on that 25th February election, the part where they talk about the day and results, the EU said elections held on schedule but lack of transparency and operational failures reduced trust in the process and challenged the right to vote. There was late opening in almost all polling units observed, mainly due to delayed arrival of sensitive materials and polling staff, and then several other parts of it where it says that the overall conduct of opening was evaluated as bad or very bad in 21 out of the 50 polling units visited. There's several parts of this report, almost 94 pages of it, a lot of it, part of which we'll be talking about today. Gentlemen, but Mr. Pele, the context is that you were part of this. You were there when this happened. Tell us about it.
Let me do what I would call a soft disclaimer. I don't work for the European Union.
Yeah,
I don't speak for the European Union. The European Union funds part of my project, which is related to governance. And so I participated in several fora where there was a roundtable discussion by the civil society around this report. And so I think I took time out to read the report and also read the press release by the State House, Mr. Lake, you know. And it's unfortunate when issues are not or are even taken out of context, you know. I think, in my opinion, I don't think the report is focusing on the illegitimacy of the president. No, I don't think so in any way. Rather, they presented what is obvious and some of the things that are in the public space and what people know about the election. There were issues around this election, you know, may not have anything to do with the elected, you know. It's the system that we should be interrogating and speak to. And of course, for me, I would prefer we dwell on the way forward. Are there recommendations in the report that the current administration needs to speak to? I'm expecting, and I haven't seen that, the president invest time, just like we have economic agenda, let's have an electoral reform agenda, you know, because the electoral system has a lot to be interrogated and corrected. Otherwise, we'll keep having the same thing. So most of the component of the report which I have read, I found to be very accurate. I'm not going to concern myself to issues about, you know, the outcome, but I'm going to concern myself about issues about the process, you know, which is very important to me. And if we don't fix it, we'll keep having the same thing.
Do you think that there were any parts of this report that could have been interpreted as a foreign institution trying to assault the credibility of the electoral process?
I don't think so. There's never the intention of most foreign entities that comes to support us. It's never their intention to undermine the sovereignty and integrity.
Well, intention is one thing.
Yes.
Actions.
Well, I haven't seen much. I'm not in the diplomatic space, but I haven't seen much of that action. Rather, I have seen huge investment of resources, investment of manpower by several institutions, foreign institutions, to help in any way they can. Yes, there are issues. There are some of them that also have, like you rightly said, ill intentions. But however, in this context, and in what I think the EU have done, the intention was never to undermine the process or the integrity of our product, which is the outcome, or the sovereignty of the country. No, that's not correct.
So were you taken aback by the pretty strongly worded statement?
I was in a bit, especially the fact that some of the presentation, I think maybe somebody did not thoroughly interrogate that report and read it to a large conclusion.
Which part?
Well, you know, the part that speaks about the preparation of the team.
So there are 50 observers?
Yeah, no, well, a bit of that, but however, now there's a process that every observer mission undertakes when they are coming to a country, and it's in line with the principle of the United Nations principle of election observation. I don't think the EU violated that principle. Now, he was talking about them coming in January. They didn't come in January. They were here in October, they were here in November, not the entire team, like observatory mission, you know, and they interacted with everybody. And besides, for every diplomatic mission or observation mission, they will have to meet with INEC and come on the invitation, at the invitation of INEC, you know. So the preparation was absolute. Another thing, Chamberlain, that you need to know about this report is that the EOM, or the European Union Observation Mission, is totally independent of the European Union. They're totally independent. As a matter of fact, the European Union did not have a say. In the delegation here did not have a say in that report. They participated just like every other person, but they were not their spokesperson. Neither am I their spokesperson, but I'm just telling you the process I was part of, the report that I read, and some of the outcomes and the takeaways that this government needs to pay attention to.
All right, Ms. Ali, having listened to Mr. Pele, there are those who may think that, and then referring to Mr. Alake's statements, that there might have been some misunderstanding concerning the background in terms of what went in putting in this report, and so you might have misconstrued the intention and taken it out of context. But give us your impression of why you thought, or if you, of course, I think you justify the statements. Go ahead anyways.
Well, thank you very much once again. You see, the import of the EU Observer Mission report would suggest that the election that brought in President Bola Tinubu was flawed on account of the glitches, especially recorded, especially in IRIV and in the Vivas. That will be appear to be the import of that report, which the EU Observer Mission actually released in piecemeal. The first time, when it faulted the election process, the first report was way back in February. And that was it gave the report in piecemeal, saying that at a much later date, which turned out to be yesterday, that the full report will be released. So the import of that was to give the impression that the elections were flawed in such a manner that takes away the legitimacy of the President Tinubu mandate. Now, you see from the reaction of the opposition, which has latched onto this report by the EU, giving credence to the idea that perhaps, just perhaps, the impression. But listening to Mr. Jakpela here, that footnote was not in the report, actually. So that's the impression the report actually gave. But thankfully, as he explained, that I think it's only one or two reports that I see that is a lot more dispassionate, is that there is a systemic, perhaps, problem with the conduct, especially by the electoral empire. I had wished that someone from the INEC was here to defend the electoral empire on the basis, but it's something that the electoral empire has defended itself in the past. Explaining the reasons why there was not a real-time uploading of the result conducted during the election. And again, if you recall very well, in the course of the February 25th election, and most of the results were, I mean, the fact that they were not really, uploaded in real time do not invalidate the result, because party agents, all of them, certify at the polling unit that the results were authentic. But it would appear that, like Mr. Alaki rightly pointed out in the statement, that most of the report was Dex job kind of thing, that the EU Observer Mission actually spread itself thin. They had just about 50 observers, so to say, 11 of them analysts, and then 40 of them spread across the vast expanse of Nigeria. So how could that actually capture the processes that eventually gave birth to President Tinubu's electoral mandate to lead the nation? So it would appear that with the footnote now by Mr. Jakpela, that was clearly not the intention, but that was the import. That's the perception a lot of people had of the report.
Okay, just to say that his name is Mr. Jake Epele.
Jake Epele, okay.
Epele,
okay,
yes.
I beg your pardon?
Yes.
Yeah, Epele, yeah.
Just to put that in context. But I'm wondering, is this really a matter of defense? Because, I mean, you said, oh, you know, we should have had INEC here. And we listened to Mr. Festus Okoye, who is the chief INEC spokesperson, director, not director now, but one of the national commissioners who also speaks on voter education and publicity, reacting shortly after the EU gave its own report, read out that lengthy report. He was there while it was read out, and he spoke extensively on INEC's impression of the report. And some people have asked, is this really a matter of defense or a matter of actually looking at, knowing or acknowledging that no matter how well-intentioned, that there would have been flaws in a process, and as a result, something that we all should work on and see how we can correct. Because I'm looking at this, there's even something for media. There's something for social media. So isn't this about, taking on board some of the observations that have been highlighted and then saying, hopefully, moving forward, we will do better? Can you hear me, Mr. Ali?
Yeah, I missed something. I missed the latter part of what you were saying. I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I was saying that, is this really about defense or about looking at what was imperfect? I mean, unless you want to say that we had perfect polls, and everyone will say, of course we didn't have perfect polls. The question is, isn't this about looking at what was imperfect in our elections? Would it be to working towards perfection? Can you hear me, Mr. Ali?
I missed that again once more, but I had the part about defense.
Okay, so I am just asking, yes, I'm just asking, should it be more about defense or about working towards perfection? That's the question I'm asking.
Yeah, I think it's not so much about defense now that some of these things have come to the fore now. The footnote provided by Mr. Jack here. Yes, I think it's about, you see the whole thing, when you're dealing with processes.
Go ahead, I can hear you.
Okay, if you're dealing with processes that involve machine and man, processes that involve technology, you expect there will be glitches. It's work in progress. Certainly some of the observations by the EU, they are very valid. I agree totally. I'm in support of the election we had on February 25th. Indeed, the whole of 2023 election cannot be by any stretch of the imagination be compared with the election we've had in the past, especially the one conducted in 2007. So it's work in progress, and I'm sure the electoral empire would take note of some of the recommendations made there, especially as it concerns technology, and especially as it concerns some of the lofty goals the electoral body set for itself. So I think, yes, these are some of the observations they made. Systemic problems, I think they can be addressed. In 2007, the late President Umar Yar'Adua, whose election was hotly contested by the former president, acknowledged that, look, the election that brought him to office was flawed, but they would take recommendation. The recommendation made, and by 2011 we had some progress. And if you recall, because it was work in progress by 2015 when the smart card reader was introduced. And I think this was how I think that election too brought for the first time an incumbent government at the center was dislodged. Some people gave credence to the improvement on the electoral process. So yes, some of the opposition made by EU, they are valid, they are certainly valid, they are systemic problems. And I'm sure that going forward, some of the observed lapses will be addressed. And another issue I always make when opportunities like this come is, look, sometimes we focus, what about those actually conducting the election? There's some politicians, supporters, and every other stakeholder in the process. You just mentioned about the media, the media too, the security. So this is a whole lot of processes involved. And I'm sure going forward, we make some of these observed lapses definitely.
So the question for us, I think the question is, why then this strongly worded statement? I mean, I'm looking at the statement released by Mr. Dele Alake. I mean, accusing a body of assaulting a country's sovereignty. These are very heavy words in international circle. And I'm wondering, what precisely in this report, and I have a copy right here, could have constituted or could have warranted the State House to release a report accusing the European Union Observer Mission of saying that you are assaulting our sovereignty by this report of yours. Have you read the report? What precisely in it, for you, constitutes an assault on Nigeria's sovereignty?
Now, you see, the EU Observer Mission wasn't the only mission that actually was in Nigeria to observe the election that was conducted. there was the African Union, there was the Commonwealth, and locally we also had the Nigerian Bar Association that had over 1,000 field men, so to say. And at the time they released their report, it wasn't in piecemeal. They issued that in February. The EU issued the first release, report in February. I remember very well. Now, in all of this, in all of the others who also were observed the election that brought in the incumbent president, they gave a report and gave a fairly, if you like, a fairly neutral, so to say. But you see, like we said now, given what has transpired now, especially the explanation given, it would mean that the way they handle the whole thing, I mean, the way the EU gave the opposition latch onto it, gave the impression that, look, all they were after is actually to take away the legitimacy of the election process. But like you said now, like Mr. Jack Epella, I hope I got the name right, that was not the intent.
Lagos?
Well, Mr. Pella, let me ask you this. A good number of people, do agree with the EU, but then at the same time, we have a number of people, like the presidency, for instance, who are kicking against. Looking at page 10 of the EU report, it lists 6 priority recommendations that largely talk about policies or, legal framework, operational framework, and consequence management, largely. I mean, if one would sum it up, that is what it will come to from just a quick glance. From where you sit and what you know, are there areas that you think are indeed, because I think it was you or Mr. Ali who also said that there hasn't been one election since 1999 that has not been contested in our country, Nigeria. So in which of these areas, in the area of legal framework, operational framework, or consequence management, that we actually lack or fall short?
Thank you.
Mr. Pella, that's for you.
Look, I think there's something we need to fix, a statement that keeps resonating. And this comparison of this past election and several other elections, why must we live in trying to compare the past when we want to go forward? I think if you consider the enormous resources, the over 92 million registered voters that registered for this election and the resources that was imputed in this election, you can't compare it with other elections. So we had a lot of resources, vast resources, technology and everything to do a better job. And so let's stop trying to compare the past when we want to move forward. To take a man's vision, just take him to the past. He will forget the vision. So let's look forward. But in answer to your question, there are several issues that need to be fixed. The issue of electoral reforms will address these 6 thematic summarized recommendations. Don't forget that there are 23 other recommendations in the report, but this is summarized recommendation that we need to focus on. And like they recommended, issue of affirmative action for women. I mean, look at the appalling result we have in the inclusion of women, persons with disability. The legal systems are not robust enough to address some of the issues that played out during the election. People have very, very minor holistic trust, even in the judiciary that is currently interrogating issues that was raised as a result of the outcome of this election. Of course, although that shouldn't be the case, we should trust our system and ensure that our system will produce not necessarily general expected result, but what is accurate, what is truth, what can be verified, you know. And so these are certain issues that needs to be addressed. You know, even the current Electoral Act has its own loopholes that needs to be addressed. A review of all of these things will bring us to where we want to be. Let's not keep talking about where we used to be when we want to go where we want to be.
Well, I think the rationale as well.
You know,
pardon me, Mr. Pele.
Say that again.
Because of time, I'm trying to squeeze in as much questions as we can. But I think the rationale behind this question is, you know, we still have the same, will I say, manpower, the same people managing that system. Yes, technology may have changed, but it's essentially the same framework for, you know, election managers, it will seem. But allow me to add this one. There have been questions about the methodology of the report itself. In fact, in that statement by Mr. Alake, he was talking about the, you know, number of observers, 40 election observers, even though the EU's report put the number of observers at 110 when it summed it from 25 EU member states. But the methodology, particularly the number of polling units visited, how appropriate is it to now extrapolate? Imagine if, 200 polling units were visited out of the hundreds of thousands in Nigeria. How appropriate is it to then extrapolate and say, because we monitored this number of polling units, then we can say conclusively that the election was not as transparent, fell short of what INEC promised?
Okay, Mr. K, what people should know, or what Nigerians should know, is that the EU observers mission, even though they are independent and they formed independent opinion, they have their network. Many of us were part of the people that kept talking to them, kept giving them information. You know, there are countless observers, you know, from the stable of the European Union partners. And don't also forget that there are other countries, Canada, that supported this process. So their finding is not necessarily based on those numbers that you're seeing, but they did a thorough, extensive work, very, very investigative, before they formed that opinion. So you can't dismiss it with a wave of hands. You can't say these things are not, you know, they had their methodology. And don't forget, there is a lay-down principle or instrument signed. Nigeria is part of the countries that signed the principle of electoral declaration and observation by the United Nations. The European Union are very thorough. I'm not here to speak for them. I'm not trying to defend them, but I'm just stating the obvious. They're very thorough. They will not invest in a process or release a product that they didn't do a thorough investigation and interrogation to come to a conclusion, you know. And that's why I keep saying, let us take the positives and see how we can make good and perfect our electoral system. Mr. President, I think you need to invest more time and energy on electoral reform, just like you're doing very well, investing time and energy in the economy and all the systems and all the corrupt people who are stealing from this country. Like I always said, this country, we don't need any loan. Get all the corrupt people and the money that they have taken and put in their bank, and we don't have to take any loan. Let's take the loan from those who are holding our money.
All right, gentlemen, we have to thank both of you. I'm Mr. J.K. Pala, founder, CEO, TFAF Africa, as well as Ali Muhammad Ali, former Deputy Director, Media and Publicity for the APC's Presidential Campaign Council. Thank you both for coming on today.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Thank you, Mowgli.
All right, we're back in just a moment.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Thank you for having me.
All right, we'll be back and continue from Lagos.
Thank you for staying with us. Now, with the growing call to prosecute culprits in the petrol subsidy scam, even as the debate over the petrol subsidy and need for palliative persists, and the endless talk about oil subsidy, oil theft, and the people also should be prosecuted, what are the things that the authorities need to do, put in place to ensure that lives and livelihoods of the people who are directly affected in the Niger Delta are not negatively made any worse than it already is? Help us welcome this morning Ovuzure Macaulay, who is APC leader, Delta State, a former commissioner of special duties. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Well, the natural question anyone would want to ask you is, in the previous administration, the former vice president, Osimajo, led quite a number of efforts in ensuring the cleanup of some parts of the Niger Delta. Any update you can give us on that?
Yeah, I would not say there has been something reasonably done when you talk about the cleanup of the Niger Delta. The issues are there, and you can see them on a daily basis. The aquatic life is completely gone. The people cannot do their farming. There is nothing really working as a result of oil exploration over the years. So when you say cleaning, where exactly, where specifically, which part of the cleanup, particularly? The Ogoni cleanup has been an age-long thing. It's been agitated for a very long time.
Has it started?
Well, I cannot specifically say it has started because I am not there in Ogoni. But from what I read, from the agitations that are still on, I don't think anything reasonably has been done in Ogoni.
So when
Ogoni is part of River State. Yeah.
So when you hear conversations, from various quarters talking about the host communities playing a role in protecting the pipe oil infrastructure for the Federal Republic of Nigeria, how does it, come across to you?
Yeah, I was one of those who agitated for it. Sorry Society State Union was secretary to government. And I actually was in the forefront of the resolution of the 8-year-old Warri George Shekiri crisis. So I can tell you about that. People should not be talking of their participation. We should be talking of part ownership. Everybody wants to protect where his daily bread comes from. Getting them involved in menial jobs or even in the surveillance, yes, it's right to get them involved in surveillance because they have a good knowledge of the geography and the topography of the area. But that is not really all you need to secure their confidence and protect those facilities. Before 2003, jobs were not even given to the communities at all. And we sat down as Security Council and said, no, these people have to be involved. And we met with Shell, we met with Chevron, and we worked out how they can be taken along. And that helped to reduce the agitations and so many issues. But thereafter, it ended there. What we should be talking about now is that a community, like Ugborodo community, for instance, where oil exploration has taken place for over 50 years, what is the life of those people?
So, if I could comment. My apologies, Carter. You quickly follow up on something that he mentioned. You talked about part ownership.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Part ownership is, even if it is 5% or 10%, interest of the people in that organization, so that at the end of every year, they're looking forward to something.
Which organization?
We're talking of the Niger Delta, and you talked about the degradation, that is the cleanup. Yeah. What is the cause of the cleanup? It's the oil exploration.
Okay.
That's the cause of the cleanup of the problem.
Yeah.
So if the people are involved.
Involved in what in particular? You talked about ownership. It's that ownership bit that I'm trying to... What ownership? Part ownership of what?
Part ownership of those companies, of the shareholding. Maybe I use the word shareholding.
Of the oil-producing companies.
Of the oil-producing companies.
Right.
But that brings their interest.
Isn't that part of the responsibility of the NNPCL? Isn't NNPCL one way or the other part owners of these companies and invariably part, owned by the federal government of Nigeria.
Owned by the federal government doesn't represent the interests of the community. Federal government is all of us.
How about the derivation fund that goes to the oil-producing states? Isn't that part of the ownership or compensation system?
The derivation fund is taken from the lot, the bulk of what goes there.
You don't think that is enough?
But when you talk of protection and what concerns the life of the people immediately, you cannot tie it just because it is a derivation fund. So that takes care of their interest. After all, most of the states, the derivation fund is not used only for the oil communities. Other parts that are not oil producing benefit from derivation funds.
Well, I know that this has been on for a while. This, would I call it campaign or agitation to have the oil producing communities part ownership. I remember as far back as even 2010. Before that, there's been that clamor. And I wonder if this is not the first time this proposal is being presented, what has been the response? I'm talking from the government, from the companies themselves, because it seems you're saying that if there's part ownership, then issues of oil bunkering, vandalism, oil theft would stop. We'll get into that, whether or not it's...
reduce.
Will reduce.
Totally.
May not even stop. But
may not stop
what
totally.
Response have you been getting from those in charge, government and oil-producing companies, as to why this is not happening or why this maybe cannot happen?
Well, like I said, if the report has been positive or the responses has been positive, then we won't still be talking about it. It's because it has not been positive.
So what do they tell you? Do they say that, well, this is not possible, we're the ones coming with the investment, so we can't give you? What kind of response have you been getting?
You see, this is an issue that will have gone through legislation. It's not an issue for one person to just come and say, yes, I've done it. So it's an issue that will pass through legislation. Mm-hmm. And it is the responsibility of the government to say, no, this thing this we're asking for will help us in a way. So let us bring it through legislation.
But
that has not been done.
The Niger Delta, if I can use that, or South has representation in the National Assembly. I mean, we saw what happened during the PIB public hearing where there was a fracas and all of that. I wonder, are those issues raised? Because I would like to imagine lawmakers come back home. They have town halls with, constituencies. I like to imagine. You can debunk whether that is true or not.
Because you want to take us another discussion entirely. Whether they actually hold those town hall meetings with their people from time to time. You are from the community too. I don't think how many times your people has invited you that there's a town hall meeting, your senator or your house or rep.
I mean, you can't be too sure. I'm speaking particularly about the Niger Delta. So are these issues raised, with the lawmakers so they can take the representation there? Because during that public hearing, what we saw was not a good representation of the Niger Delta. So are the real issues tabled? And what has been the response of the lawmakers?
If you ask me, as far as those peculiar issues are concerned, the views of the people have not been fully carried to that National Assembly.
But, we saw representation from the communities, for example, during that public hearing.
Yes. When the communities go there and make their representation, who takes it up from there? And how much of it were they taking? How seriously did they take them? Yes, they were invited, they make representations. What came out of it? We're talking about the final product of every exercise.
You were also, I think, Commissioner for Energy at some point, if I'm correct. So at least you have... You're also a journalist. You were a journalist, unionist, so man of many parts, but basically you will have very good information on the oil sector. So if you say that if the communities are given part ownership, then the issues of oil theft would reduce. Maybe Nigeria can start doing over 2 million barrels per day. Are you saying that is a reason why these issues persist? And that primary reason why people say, well, if you don't give us part ownership, then we'll take it some way or the other?
Okay, let me tell you this. The area, like we all know, has been long neglected. It's that long neglect that gave room to the agitation. So what we're doing is, now walking back, what do we do? The issue of neglect has been established. Because if you go to most of these communities, there are no schools, there are no roads, their lands has been degraded, their aquatic life is gone. So the people are at the point of frustration. Where you see a child of 9, 10 years who is supposed to be in school, paddling canoe in the morning to get a means of livelihood. And then you look up there, you see either Chevron Yard or Shell Yard or any of these oil companies living in a place that you could just compare to somewhere in Europe. Across the fence. Until 2003, Abigbodo didn't, Abigbodo didn't even have drinking water.
That's in Delta State.
In Delta State, and as at that time, Chevron has occupied that place for 40 years.
Why?
Electricity was the problem.
If you could speak to that.
Until government sat and forced them, you must give this people electricity, you must extend this water you are drinking to them.
So from the, the laws and all of that govern oil exploration, are they responsible primarily for providing water, electricity for the communities, or is it the government?
That should be part of their social responsibility. That should be part of their corporate social responsibility.
It is a role of government. So government failed, and then they were meant to pick it up, is what you're saying.
Well, you talked about the social responsibility. It is a social responsibility. Is that to say that
should be part of it?
Is that saying that they haven't done anything at all in terms of social responsibility?
What I'm telling you that anything those people have gotten is an outcome of agitation.
Even corporate social responsibility projects.
Most of those, like I've told you about how they got water, how they got electricity. There was a serious agitation that people have to be flown from Warri to that place to be able to assuage the community. They sat there for days, women.
It goes back to the question that Kawade is asking. Government failed. I mean, we talked about the 13% derivation, and I'm pretty sure that that's not the only one. We've talked about the NDDC, the Niger Delta Development Commission. It's supposed to be part of their responsibility to ensure that these things happen.
Right.
But then, so the 13%, for instance, goes to the states. NDDC is an organ of the federal government that is supposed to be having interventions. Is there any way or any instrument by the communities or, individuals such as yourself to ensure that these monies are spent the way they ought to be spent? Okay, maybe I should ask you differently. You have been in government in Delta State. How was the 13% derivation fund in Delta State spent?
Okay, 13% in Delta State, you have what they call the Subsidy. It's a commission for the development of the oil-producing communities. And by the law...
That is different from the NDDC.
Yes, that is Delta State now, peculiar to Delta, on the issue of 13%.
Okay.
And the law establishing it states that 50% of the derivation fund should go to that commission for the purpose of handling issues that directly involve those communities. That is how it goes in Delta State. But what I'm saying is, if you look at the magnitude of the problems of those areas, it will shock you. Because, like I'm saying, we're talking of building bridges.
No, I get what you... Let's do...
Let me finish.
People will make reference
Yeah, that's what I'm
days.
finished.
Okay.
Let me finish.
All right.
So the 13%, where 50% is tied to those areas, cannot effectively address some of those issues. But when you now talk of the NDDC, you have a point there. But the issue is, if you ask me, this is my own opinion, the NDDC has not met the role of intervention that is supposed to play.
So who is asking them questions? Who is taking them on?
Who put them there?
So the agitation cannot go to the NDDC, but it can go to the oil-producing companies.
Agitation has gone to NDDC, agitation has gone to states. Okay. The agitation is everywhere. Whoever can take up this matter, take it up.
You seem to be saying now that the state government, the SOPADEC, using the derivation funds, has done well.
I'm
but
not
the
saying,
NDDC
what I'm saying is that what is on the derivation, or what comes to the derivation, haven't shared it. Because you see, when you say derivation, oil producing, you say oil producing state, oil producing community. So when you send this derivation, you cannot put the whole 100% into those communities alone, because those other persons in that state also have to benefit from it. Just like the old nation. Isn't that
the reason the money was given to the oil-producing state in the first place?
Yes.
Because of the oil-producing communities.
If the whole nation is benefiting from the oil, you cannot now deny part of that state not having any share. So if you say 50% goes to the communities, and the entire part of the other state share from the other 50%, which is joined to the normal accrual to the state.
Right. Just quickly as we wind down, sir. So if a lot of people are clamoring for a probe, not just of the subsidy regime, but oil theft, they want names. Do you think names of community leaders would spring up if this probe eventually happens?
Well, in case for oil theft, I don't see anybody. You see, let me tell you, there's a lot of technology instilling
So
oil.
community leaders, community members are not,
You cannot,
are not a part of
I'm
the
not
oil.
swearing, I'm not taking an oath on their behalf. But for the little I know, I have visited where there are oil explorations. I see the technology involved. A layman cannot do it. Okay. Even getting to those points where those pipes are losing, it is not easy for you to know.
Essentially, you agree
it's
that
an elite thing.
So do you agree then with those that say that security agencies, in fact, at the very top, are responsible for this as well?
Not only security agencies, more be joint team, because it's not only one person.
Okay.
You can't tie it to only security agencies. Why you cannot exempt
Well, I guess this is an ongoing conversation because it's not something we should keep quiet on. Ovuzure Macaulay, APC leader in Delta State and former Commissioner of Special Duties, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation.
You're welcome.
Well, we have some comments from our people.
Well, take a look at this tweet from Law Alpha C, and it's on, well, the EU's final report, saying, while we stoutly and boldly rebuff the EU's final report on the recently conducted general elections, let us exercise our conscience to examine, or rather to admit some truths embedded in the report and scheme to improve going forward.
This one is from Henry. It's an email and says, fuel subsidy scam and impact of removal. It's very mind-boggling that both the government and the people are caressing a situation that has brought us all to our knees. Corruption and lack of accountability. I expect the National Assembly to reopen the probe on the subsidy regime, or even the federal government commencing a judicial probe. Our people should not remain helpless as thieves steal, kill, destroy, and abort the hope of a better today and tomorrow.
I have this email from Edward Tiku talking about subsidy removal. He says, removal of subsidy, which is causing untold hardship on the populace, is not right in every ramification. The poor Nigerians are told to sacrifice for the tumor to be removed, but those in government are not doing the same. What government should have done is to look at the corruption in the subsidy system and tackle that by punishing and fixing the process to make it accountable. If that is done, all the so-called money claimed to have been spent on subsidy will be clear to all, unless the government cannot fight corruption. That's from Edward Tico.
All right, just before we go, we have time for one more thing. Residents of Trademore Estate in Abuja have shut down that estate because they say they are protesting the planned demolition of the estate by FCT, that's the Federal Capital Development Authority. So they're back and forth on this one. It's been a matter that's gone on. The FCDA plans to demolish that place because they claim that part of what we read this morning didn't have proper documents because of flooding.
They have no approved building plan.
Yeah, because they are trying to connect it to why there's flooding. But some of the residents there say no, that is not the case because they needed to understand the background concerning why this happened. So all of that we will be bringing you here at channel. So just need to keep it locked and then we'll get you the backstory concerning why and what led to this. Whether or not the FCDA will go on with the demolition, considering what is going on, we will bring all of that to you. Well, that is the show today. We do thank you all for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Chamberlain, so goodbye.
Thank you. I'm Malpel Gun Yusuf.
I'm Ikechukwu.
I'm Ayo Makinde. Have a wonderful rest of your day.